the very beginning, I've always been a very happy kid, and I've never really had to struggle ever, except for circumstances that I myself create, like the book and everything. And because of my father's job in the University of Konstanz in Germany, we got to, all four of us, we got to go to Germany. And at that time, like, I was very carefree. I was 11 years old, and I really didn't know English, and even though I did, it was not very fluent as this. And then we had to learn German, because Germans don't speak English. They prefer replying in German, even if we're asking something in English. So my sister and I, we had to struggle a lot to learn German, and we learned it within 3 or 5 months, but the transition between German and from Nepali to German was impossible. So at the same time, we had to learn English as well. And I think, like, the first time that I actually started thinking of books was when my family was invited to my father's professor, who he was working with. She invited us all to a dinner party, and at that time everyone was adult, so I was quite bored, and I've always been sketching since I was very small. So I was looking at these books that were on the walls of the professor, and there were books with sketches on them, and it was written Enid Blyton. And if you don't know Enid Blyton, she is a very famous children's English book writer. And the professor who had invited us, like, she told us that you should read that book. It's really interesting. And that was my first book ever. So I was quite apprehensive about it because I'd never read a book before. And at that time, I opened the book and I started reading, and through the dinner party, I couldn't stop reading. I read it, and at home, we went back home, and then still I was reading it, and I couldn't stop until I finished it. I went into the night, like at 2 a.m., I finished the book on my bed that I was, the sofa that I was using as a bed at that time. And I think I haven't stopped reading books after that. I think that was the point where I decided that books can be infinite. There is no limit that books should be this many million books should be there. So I decided that maybe it's time that I added one more collection to the infinite books. So I decided after reading a while that I was going to write a book. But then at that time I didn't know that writing a book requires reading books. So after that Enid Blyton series, me and my sister, we discovered the library in Konstanz. And we went there and we discovered that there were walls and walls full of books. And after that I was a kid, so I was more interested in fantasy. I think I still am. And I started reading fantasy works like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Narnia, and everything. And at the age of 15, I decided that it was time for me to write, finally, after reading as many books as I could. And when I first started writing, I think I was very pressurized by the thousands of words written by other great novelists and geniuses who were much better than me, and not only were they are still better than me right now. And I was really nervous. Like, writing a book is like painting something, and it's as unnerving as going on stage and talking like right now. And the first year that I started writing books, at that time I thought I was doing very well, but clearly I wasn't, because even though the first year I wrote about 150 pages, the grammar was wrong, the sentence made no sense, and the paragraphs were completely befuddled. And even if you had read it, it would have been really bad. And I didn't know that sentences needed flow, the story needed a flow. And what you have to remember when I talk about writing is that I was a teenager. I was 15, and as you guys know, as you have all been through teenage years, you guys know being a teenager is very different. It's very drastic, and I was going through changes. I was going through changing friends. We had come back to Nepal at that point, and I was changing schools because the school that I had joined before was not, after learning German for so many years, I was not fit to study in a school where they still spoke Nepali, and because I couldn't understand. And I was changing schools, I was making new friends, and at the same time I was growing as a student, and it was very, very difficult. Even though while I spoke, the grammar was right, while writing, it's a completely different process. You cannot write properly until you're properly trained, and the only training I could have gotten was by writing itself. So I kept trying, I kept pushing myself, and even though the paragraphs didn't make sense, I kept writing. And I think even though the first year didn't go very well, I think writing itself was enough for me. It was enough of an effort from me myself. So the second year I wrote well, but I didn't write too much. And the third year I discovered the Hunger Games. And if you guys have heard of Hunger Games, the movie where Jennifer Lawrence has played. The book itself, it's been written on present tense. And as a child writer, I was very much influenced by it. And being a fanatic, I thought that maybe writing in present tense would be cooler. So I changed 200 pages of past tense into present tense, and I still regret it. I don't know why I did that. And the first year went by editing every verb of 200 pages. So the fourth year, I finally decided when I was in 12th grade that I need to finish this. This was a project I started as a child, and it was my dream. It was supposed to be a destiny kind of thing. So I decided that I have to make myself finish the book. So I did. I finished the book, but it was not as easy. It was just as hard as starting the book. Finishing a book is like trying to finish your child. You fall in love with the characters, you fall in love with the book, you fall in love with the events of the book itself, and you feel like those events are yours. And I made like many drafts. I made like 20 drafts for ending the book. And it was like 50 pages of each draft, and it took me a year again. And finally, I managed to finish the book. And my father, he helped me publish the book from a German publisher called Scholars Press. It's from Saarbrück, Germany. And my book is called Beyond Her Eyes. And I finished the book, but what I want to talk about today is, rather than the book itself, I want to talk about how I got into the world of books. That incident that made me turn towards books. I hope that everyone has that kind of an incident, because finding books is the most beautiful thing that could happen to you, seriously, because you get to discover so many stories, so many. Maybe there can be, it doesn't necessarily have to be a book about stories. It also can be about history and everything. And I really hope that you guys can enjoy fantasy books, especially because since I have a passion for fantasy novels. And that day when I first discovered books was very important to me emotionally. The professor that who made me discover books was Miriam Butt. She's also the one who has commented on my book. And she has written a very short and sweet sentence saying that she's very proud of the book itself. And I really want to thank most of the, my storytelling capability to her. And I think there have been many people who have influenced me to write, especially my father. And I'm very grateful to those people. And that day, when I first discovered the book world, sorry I've been repeating this very much, but it's very important to me. And discovering Enid Blyton, adventure, fantasy, and everything, it was important for me. It was important for me as a writer, but I also think that everybody else, as readers as well, I think it's very important to be discovered, to discover books. And if I were to talk about not having discovered books, I don't really want to think about it because I don't feel very comfortable, because I don't think I would have been here if not for that day when she told me to read that book. I don't think I would have ever entered the creative world.